Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. Later in the show, we go through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' question, and sometimes we play an audio clip of the week, but this week we don't have one. So we're just going to go through the news you need to know about, and let's start here. This first news story comes from Pro Football Rumors, and I think you guys have already heard about it. And I'm not really sure if we covered this in last week's episode, but the Dolphins have cut former University of Miami running back Mark Walton. Obviously, he was suspended by the NFL, and then some stuff later came out about his personal situation, and he was later cut. That's all you really need to know about that, and I don't want to get into it, especially if we covered it in last week's episode. I just wanted to make sure you guys, I know that I think we could cover his suspension, but now he's gonna be gone for the rest of the year for good. I don't know if we covered that or not. So there you go. Like I've said in last week's episode, Patrick Laird and Myles Gaskin should get more carries than he does, and we'll discuss that later in the show. But let's go to the next news story. This news story also comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins head coach Brian Flores told reporters that Ryan Fitzpatrick will remain Miami. Okay, no, wrong news story. I apologize for that. Let's see here. Excuse me, guys. Here we go. This next news story, this is a quick one, too. Dolphins place Shad Jones and Bobby Kane on injured reserve. They're going to be done for the rest of the season. Nothing really to talk about there, other than the fact that it makes the depth of the team worse and just all around the team's worse for it. But, it's hard to get as bad as we are now. It just makes the coaching that much harder on the staff and what they have to deal with week in and week out. And they have a really bad combination they're working with right now. Their D-line is super thin. It's very untalented. The secondary isn't talented at all. And those two combinations are the reason this team's giving up as much points as they are. There's very little talent on the defense. And it really just forces your hand to do a lot of different things. And we really can't do anything right now. And like I said, it's just a bad combination. This next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick is perfect for the Dolphins situation, according to Armando Salguero of the Miami Herald. Fitzpatrick has helped their offensive unit maintain an acceptable level of competence, but not at a level that could cause the team to win enough. Notes that head coach Brian Flores, choices have been made clear that the Miami Dolphins believe that Josh Rosen is not the franchise's answer at the quarterback position. So let me repeat that one more time because I kind of fumbled a little bit. Brian Flores' choices have made it clear that Josh Rosen is not the franchise's answer under center. So nothing that he said. It was just like, the decision to play Fitzpatrick says that I guess Josh Rosen is in the future. I disagree with that statement. Just because Ryan Fitzpatrick is playing doesn't mean that Josh Rosen doesn't have a future in this league or can't become something special. Although, I still want to take a first-round quarterback this upcoming draft. It's really between two guys right now, and if that's not the case, maybe we could get someone later like a Jordan Love or Jalen Hurts, maybe a later round quarterback. But I feel like either it's between Burrow or Tua, in my opinion, and then the rest is kind of a pretty big question mark, and you don't really know what you're gonna get. So I still want to do that, but my opinion on the whole Josh Rosen situation and Ryan Fitzpatrick situation is clearly Ryan Fitzpatrick is a better quarterback than Josh Rosen. He just is in every single way. I mean, what Ryan Fitzpatrick has been able to do with the people surrounding him is very impressive. His pocket presence is unreal. The ability to sense pressure, get rid of the football, knowing when to get rid of it, especially how early he sometimes gets rid of it. He's been called for, I don't even think he's ever been called for an intentional grounding all season, which is crazy because he's done a great job of getting rid of the ball in the pocket and always finding the right place and the right place to get rid of it. So the way he's quarterbacking this team right now is very impressive. His playmaking is obviously better than Josh Rosen because Josh Rosen isn't as mobile as Ryan Fitzpatrick, and he couldn't, some of the places, we wouldn't have had 24 points if it wasn't for Ryan Fitzpatrick, scrambling for that touchdown and some of the plays he made in that game. So his mobility has really helped this offensive line a lot. So I don't necessarily think it means that, Josh Rosen doesn't have a future in Miami. I just think he is just better than Rosen, especially with this particular team. Doesn't necessarily mean that Josh Rosen doesn't have a chance to become something. Think about how long Jimmy Garoppolo's had behind Tom Brady. Not comparing the two situations because they're completely different, but my point is it doesn't mean Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't a talented quarterback just because he was sitting behind someone. That doesn't mean that. There's many different examples of that. Steve Young sitting behind Joe Montana didn't mean Steve Young was never going to become anything, because obviously he eventually did. It just, meant that Joe Montana was better at the time. I'm not saying that, Josh Rosen is going to be Steve Young or anything like that. I'm saying that doesn't, just because someone is starting over you, especially early in your career, it doesn't mean he's better than you. Or you're a terrible player because of it, if that makes any sense. Because Ryan Fitzpatrick's a good quarterback. He's not a bad quarterback. He's a good quarterback. The way he's played this year is very impressive to me. The only time he's had turnovers as of late, obviously earlier in the season he had some bad turnovers, have only been in situations where he was just, the game was already out of hand and he was just trying to make a play. But again, staying on topic, like I said, I don't necessarily think it means Josh Rosen isn't going to play. I just think Ryan Fitzpatrick is doing a very good job of quarterbacking this team at the moment. And his play style fits this team better than Josh Rosen's. Josh Rosen is obviously not a very mobile quarterback, and he would just he would not do as well behind an offensive line like this, even though the offensive line is playing a lot better. I think what this says more than anything is Brian Flores is dedicated to win, because if this team truly wanted to lose every week, and that was like the message from up top or whatever, like you have to play the worst, players possible, and week to week, then Josh Rosen would play over Ryan Fitzpatrick. That's true. But it doesn't mean Josh Rosen can't become something, because he still, in my opinion, is a talented player. So that's what I think about that news story. This next news story comes from ESPN. How the Tua Tagovailoa injury impacts the Miami Dolphins. Again, this comes from ESPN. Miami Dolphins fans have spent the 2019 NFL season dreaming of Tua Tagovailoa, the talented Alabama quarterback who many have projected to go number 1 overall. But one devastating injury, dislocated and fractured his hip, has thrown that hope into flux. Tagovailoa's season-ending hip injury has significant influence on the Dolphins' pursuit of a franchise quarterback. Is the Tua dream over for Miami, or does this somehow make it even more obtainable? With the Dolphins being 2-9 at the time of this article, we were 2-8, spending most of this year collecting 3 first-round selections and a projected 14 total picks in the 2020 NFL Draft might be the single most important event in Miami Dolphins' extreme rebuild. Let's see here. Is there any more important information? It's just an interesting topic, I guess. Do I think it impacts his draft stock? That's an interesting question. No, I don't think it is going to impact his draft stock. I think depending on the extensive, and it will be extensive, coverage of this particular topic, when the season is over, it's going to be insane. People are going to be like, oh, this is what his doctor said, this is what his camp said, all that kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff is going to be happening. I don't expect Tua to drop out of the top 5 due to this at all, actually. I don't think he's going to drop at all. Now, if his doctor comes out and said, yeah, this guy, is probably going to take a year, this could be like a Jalen Smith situation where he would have been a top 10 pick, but obviously the knee injury, I think, what did he fall to the second round? Same thing with Myles Jack. He would have been a Dolphin if it wasn't for the knee issues that came out before the draft. So if it is perceived from the doctors to be as bad, as it could be, then he might fall. But I think if it's a green light, I think it's pretty much an up in the air as of right now. But I don't think he's going to drop at all. If I had to predict it, I don't think he's going to drop from the top 5. So how does it affect the Dolphins? I mean, I think they're still going to get him. They're going to get it one of the two. I know that. They're either going to get Joe Burrow or Tua Tagovailoa. And I think they'll be happy with both of those players. So, and who knows, we might have a Chase Young situation where the Dolphins, maybe Tua isn't there, they take Chase Young if they have a high pick, and then they trade back up into the first round with all their picks and grab a quarterback. Either maybe Tua's still there on the board or Joe Burrow. I think one of the two will still be there. So that's a possibility as well. But again, I don't think this hip injury is going to drop him. Definitely not out of the first round. So let's get to the box score, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, the Dolphins played today. They fall again to fall to 2-9 against the Cleveland Browns. They fall 24-41 on the road. Let's start with the defense. And again, I'm going to try to focus on the positives because a lot of the criticisms and negatives are the same week to week. It's the same thing that plagues us, every week. The pass rush is just non-existent. There's no one up front that can make a play, that can hit a running back in the backfield, that can, wreck a game plan, or at least bother the quarterback a little bit. There's none of that on this defensive line. It is stripped to the bone. I don't think a lot of these guys have a bright future in the NFL. I don't think Taco Charlton has a bright future. I think Vince Beagle is overrated. When I watch the Sun Sentinel, the X's and Omar show that they do, they're like, oh, Vince Beagle is the next Rob Ninkovich. No disrespect to Vince Beagle. He might turn into something like that, but he is nothing special. And I don't, I know he's a young player, but he is not Rob Ninkovich. Let's just put it that way. He cannot set the edge in the running game like Rob Ninkovich could. He cannot disrupt the passer like Rob Ninkovich could. I don't think he's even close to that good. Taco Charlton is just not good enough at anything. He's not built to stop the run and set the edge. He does not fit this defense because of that, because of his size, and his pass rush skills aren't great. So I don't think has a future on this team. Charles Harris, I don't think very many people do, other than I would say Christian Wilkins is the only one that I could say who has a future on this defensive line, and the only reason I say that is because Wilkins is a first round pick. It was the first pick of this regime. Obviously, they're not going to give up on him, this far in. I don't think the interior is that bad. Devon Godshaw, he's a solid player. He's definitely I think he could be a very good rotational player, but he's not a star. There's not very many players or any talented players on this defensive line that stand out to me at all. None of them. I just don't see it. At best, one of them can be a solid starter in this league, at the very best, but none of them have a ceiling to be a superstar. And everything that I've seen from Christian Wilkins so far hasn't been amazing. Now, granted, he's a young player. He's playing on a very bad defense, especially now. But he hasn't shown any type of dominance at all. Now, defensive tackle is a completely different position when you compare it to other positions and how other positions have success. Most of the defensive tackles, and there was a lot of them taken, especially in the first 15 picks, haven't played all that well. Ed Oliver, I would say, probably has the best stats. Quinnen Williams has had a very slow start to his career, just as slow as Christian Wilkins. So hopefully some of these guys, well, I guess not hopefully because most of them are AFC East opponents, but at least hopefully Christian Wilkins will at some point become something. Now, before the season even started, and before I guess finishing up on the defensive line, I thought Christian Wilkins was going to be used in a more creative manner than he has been, because he is an athletic dude, and he has very much been, pigeonholed as a Vince Wilfork type, has not really been moved around at all for that matter. And when he was at Clemson, they used him all around the defensive line. They moved him all the time. He played on the edge, he played inside, and I felt like we could do some of those things with him, and we just haven't seen it. Now, whether that's the coach's short-sightedness, maybe he can do that, but he hasn't sparked anything, and or hasn't looked the part for me either. So again, this defensive line is just atrocious. And that showed up into this game. We'll go through the box score for the Cleveland Browns offense really quickly here. Baker Mayfield finished 24 of 34 passing. He had 327 yards on the day, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Nick Chubb finished with 106 rushing yards on 21 carries. He averaged 5 yards a carry with 1 touchdown. Kareem Hunt finished with 8 carries for 37 yards and 1 score as well. Jarvis Landry led the football team in receiving with 10 grabs for 148 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Odell Beckham was right behind him with 6 receptions for 84 yards and 1 touchdown himself. So again, the Dolphins defense just really couldn't stop anything. And like I said, it's the combination of the two. The secondary can't cover at all, and the defensive line can't rush the passer or stop the run. So it just is a terrible mixture of those two things. And that's what you see on Sundays. I mean, the Dolphins just could not, in terms of the box score of quarter, the Browns scored 14 in the first, 14 in the second, 0 in the third, and 13 in the fourth. The only good quarter the Dolphins had on defense was the third quarter, and most of the good plays they had on defense was the Cleveland Browns hurting themselves, whether it was a bad snap or a penalty. It was very rarely anything the Dolphins really did by themselves. The Charles Harris sack was the only super highlight of the day. And to really wrap this up before we move on, I will say this: in the defense of the defense, there were not, they got a lot of bad breaks on a lot of some of the calls that were. I felt like the one where Ken Crawley up the seam to Jarvis Landry, where it looked like it was zone coverage. He kind of really helped out the seam defender and came over and batted the ball. That to me was not pass interference. I think that was the most egregious one of the day. The Jerome Baker interception. Now, granted, that doesn't we were not going to win that game. It doesn't matter at the time, but obviously it would have taken points off the board. That should have been a clean pick. I know that we got called for leading with the helmet, but the helmet literally didn't touch anybody, and it touched the football. And then Jerome Baker picked it off. So in defense of the defense, the refs were definitely not on their side. A lot of third downs were extended due to pass interference. It was the most pass interference I've seen thrown in a game in a very long time. And again, I'm not saying all of them were bad, because they weren't, but a good amount of them weren't good calls at all. A lot of those calls could have been 50-50, and I could totally see a referee crew being totally fine with what happened on those plays. So the defense of the Dolphins defense, it wasn't. Some of those calls were very, very poor, in my opinion, to keep some of those third downs going, but they didn't do anything good all day. The linebackers were very disappointing, other than, I guess, Jerome Baker. But, I expected a little bit more out of Raekwon McMillan. I just felt like the entire defense just did not play very well. The effort was there. It just, there's not much they could have done. And, the Browns have a lot of talent on their team with some of their skill positions, and I think that was the difference in the game. Not necessarily, I don't think our scheme was beat. I just felt like the Browns just had more talent. And I think that's what it came down to. And we just couldn't make enough plays, and we didn't have enough playmakers on defense to keep us in this game. Because we scored 24, and we're going to get to the offense right now. So let's go through the box score really quickly. Ryan Fitzpatrick finished 21 of 39 passing for 214 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 1 rushing touchdown. Ryan Fitzpatrick also led the team in rushing. He had 5 carries for 45 yards, and he averaged 9 yards a carry and 1 touchdown. Right, again, like I said, Ryan's playing well, despite being on this, not the greatest team in the world. Patrick Laird, our boy and our savior, hopefully, but he didn't get enough touches in this game, in my opinion. He had 3 carries for 20 yards. Kalen Ballage had the bulk of the carries for the entire team. He had 7 carries for 13, and Myles Gaskin had 4 carries for 10. Devontae Parker led the team in receiving with 6 catches for 91 yards. He averaged 15 yards a catch, and Allen Hurns was right behind him with 4 grabs for 42 yards. And on a side note, Mike Gesicki scored his first NFL touchdown, which is hard to believe, in the Cleveland Browns. In this Cleveland Browns game. So let's get into the offensive side of the football. I really did not like the game plan going into this game. I don't know if we thought, just because of the Cleveland Browns rankings on defense now, and the Bills defense, by the way, is very low when it comes to run defense. I don't know what we were thinking going into this game. And Brian Flores preaches versatility and stuff of that nature, and understanding your strengths and your weaknesses and changing and adapting week to week, which is exactly what the Patriots do. So if that's the case, then why in the world did we watch the film against the Bills and try to run the football again? We were very much a run-first team on the first few drives of this game, and it really hurt us. It really did. We cannot run the football. We cannot run the football. Even Daryl Johnson pointed out, who was commentating the game, pointed out during the game, and this is something I've said for like 2 weeks now, the Dolphins they're a better passing team. It's so true. We should have spread, like I said last week, we should have done a lot more spread formations, like we did do in this game. We had success with it, and run out of those sets. And the best run we had with the running backs was out of a spread formation in the shotgun when we handed off to Patrick Laird, and I think it was 1st and goal at that point. I really don't understand what the coaching staff is seeing to continue with this running game, but it's disappointing because I expect more out of this coaching staff in terms of recognizing the faults of this team, understanding that, hey, when we're in I formation, when we're under the center and we have, 2 tight end sets or 3 tight end sets and we're trying to run the football, it does not work. We are not talented enough to push the other team's line. And we continue to try it, and it's very frustrating. And like I said a million times, the best thing this team does is pass the football. That's the best thing that they do. And that's the best thing that they did against the Browns, even though they lost 24-41. That's the best thing that they did. They did not have a consistent running game. Their leading rushing runner, in terms of a running back, had 20 yards on 3 carries. And the guy that carried the ball the most had 13 yards on 7 carries. I do not understand what the thought process was going into that game. I do not get it. We all watch this team. Literally, this team is on track to be the worst running team in the in the history of the National Football League. The worst. Okay? I just don't. All of these things point to, hey, probably don't run the football, but we continue to try it anyway. Am I saying the Dolphins should pass it 1,000 times a game? No. I'm saying they should pass to set up the run. That's all I'm saying. They're better at throwing the football. They get off to these things slow starts and they're behind 7-0, and then they're punting the ball on a 3 and out on the road. You can't do that. You cannot do that. And that, I just don't understand what they were thinking. I really don't. You're not pushing anyone around with this offensive line. You're just not gonna do it. Kalen Ballage is clearly not the answer. Okay? He's clearly not. Why he played, why he had the bulk of the carries again this week, and he was a bigger feature in this offense than Albert Wilson was, is insane to me. Now, I'm not, or even Jakeem Grant, who got injured, but clearly there was an emphasis on Kalen Ballage with the Wildcat package and stuff like that. I just don't get it. I don't like it. I think this is the first gripe I have with this coaching staff, is because we're told all these things. Now, granted, they don't have the talent to be successful on a consistent basis. I understand that. But not to recognize, what they're preaching. I'm not saying they don't practice what they preach, because I won't go that far. But offensively, I just don't understand why they keep doing this, why they keep trying to attack defenses under center like this and try to be a run-first team. I don't get it. Granted, if this team was better, then I'm totally fine with that, because this run defense of the Browns is not very good. But it's just, this team can't do it. They haven't been able to do it for 2 years now. I mean, they've been terrible at running the football, so especially under center. So, I mean, it is what it is, dude. I just really did not like the game plan at all. And I didn't like the fact that Kalen Ballage continued to be the starting back for us. I wasn't a big fan of it. Now, despite all that, Devontae Parker continues to look really good. Allen Hurns, I feel like, is still filling his role and doing his job in that role. He was missed a few times. Albert Wilson definitely doesn't look the same, and that's very sad. I will say that. It's sad. He's just not the same that he was last year. Hopefully he can at some point get back to that. He's just not the same player in the open field that he was. And Mike Gesicki, despite only having, 28 receiving yards and 1 touchdown, he was open on a lot of, quite a few plays actually that he was just missed on, unfortunately. Not quite a few. There was like 2 or 3 that I can remember that he had pretty good separation, and either it was just too much pressure that Ryan was, had to rush the throw, or he was just missed on a read. And again, it is what it is, dude. Again, it continues to amaze me how, good this offensive line, can block in the passing game at times because of the lack of talent, and that's a testament to the coaching staff and really getting them ready from game to game. And unfortunately, the Dolphins don't understand that, and they really tried to be a run first team on Sunday, and it just didn't work. Again, they fell behind in the first quarter, 14-0. You just can't do that. You got to start faster, and you got to do what you do best. And the Dolphins did not come out and do that on Sunday. So yeah, it's another tough loss to take. It's another really tough game to watch. As a fan, it was to be taken out of a game that early is very disheartening, and to score 14 points in the first 2 quarters of the game is just it sucks, man. It really sucks, and I just can't wait for next year. I really can't. I mean, obviously the Dolphins have to do, or are going to be a better team, because there's nowhere but up from here. And I do have faith in this coaching staff going forward. I understand why they did what they did. It just, they saw a weakness in the Cleveland Browns, and they're like, okay, they're not very good at this. Let's try it. It just can't. It just doesn't work with this team. It doesn't work with this roster, and hopefully, we can resolve some of those issues in the future, and get better, and hopefully through free agency and the draft, we can be a versatile team where we can run the football, where we can pass the ball when we want to. It just, the roster doesn't lend itself to that because there's not a lot of versatile players on this roster, and the offensive line is very one-dimensional. So, it is what it is. It is what it is. And I want to say this before we go. I have a lot, I think, he might be the only one who has said this, but Omar Kelly, said it's on the coaching staff why this running game is as bad as it is. That's not true, dude. The talent level is just terrible. I mean, they cannot physically do their job. It has nothing to do with the coaching staff. Now, is it their fault for, constantly banging their head against the wall and trying it, even though they got destroyed against Buffalo? I mean, it was an embarrassment with the running game. And again, that's another game that we should, we've already been through it. But, I could see, and I just said, I criticized them for that in this episode, but I don't think it's definitely not the coaching staff's fault for this, the lack of production in the running game. That I feel like that's very stupid to say. So let's get into the fan Q&A. Now, I uploaded the fan Q&A too late. I should have done it earlier like I normally do. We have very little questions. We actually have only 4 questions, ladies and gentlemen. And I had to record. I'm very tired, so I wanted to record this episode as quickly as possible. So we're gonna get into these 4 questions, and I guess we'll see you guys next week. All right, this first question comes from Julian. Julian asks, what do you think about building around Rosen? Thank you for the podcast again. Man, it sucks to see the Fins lose, but I will never stop being a Dolphins fan. Yeah, I saw a lot of Dolphins fans in Cleveland, which was cool to see, and it was cool to see. Just, you look at the whole stadium and you see all this brown, and then you see some patches of aqua, and they're out there freezing. Trying to just watch their team and the team that they grew up with. And I feel like the Dolphins fans travel very well, especially like New York and really everywhere. I feel like they travel very, very, very well. But so yeah, like you said, never stop being a Dolphins fan. Of course not. At this point, you'd be stupid to kind of look the other way. So let's see here. What do you think about building? I don't building around Rosen is interesting. I think what the Dolphins need to do, and I can't answer that question because I'm not sold on Rosen yet either, but what the Dolphins need to do is seriously evaluate the situation, take in all of the information that they possibly can, and hopefully they make the right decision that is what is best for this franchise moving forward. I think that is the best way that I can say it, because right now it's very hard, especially this far from the draft and this far from the offseason in general, to give you a clear picture on what the Dolphins should do. We just don't know a lot of things yet. Like, there could be better options than Rosen. And, we don't know what the Tua situation is going to look like. We don't know what the Joe Burrow situation is going to look like. So to me, I think, like I said, I think it's just right now all the fans and the organization just needs to take it all in and then process from there, because there's just too much that lies ahead to really give a good opinion on that. This next question comes from Troy, but I will say this: I'm not sold on Rosen. This next question comes from Troy. Troy asks, if Miami ends up with the second pick in the draft, do we take Chase Young or trade down to get additional picks? I vote for additional picks, but having a Von Miller type would be awesome. Yeah, Chase Young is the real deal. He's the real deal. He, what did they play? Penn State, I think, this past Saturday. And I watched a little bit of that, and he played very well in that game and had a lot of big plays in that game. And yeah, he's the real deal, and he's very much. I feel like he fits the system really well too. So, and again, he comes from that lineage of pass rushers with the Bosa brothers, and now him. So yeah, I like Chase Young a lot, and who knows what the Dolphins will do? I don't know. I would love if the Dolphins did take Chase Young. Would it be? It'd be very interesting. And what if they traded back up and got Joe Burrow to a title? I mean, I think all of us would lose our minds. But to get those two in the first round would be crazy. But and it's possible. It's possible that the Dolphins can do it. But there's quite a few talented guys out there in this draft that make this draft very exciting for this team. What I would personally do, if I couldn't take a quarterback, I would take Chase Young. If it was between Chase Young and trading down, I would take Chase Young. This next question comes from Jack Pack. Jack Pack asks, if they end up picking in the top 3 and Chase Young is still available, should they take him? With Tua's injury, he might be available later in the round when they pick again. I think with Tua's injury, there is more of a possibility that the Dolphins could, than before at least, that the Dolphins could get both of them. Will it happen? No, I don't think so. Like I said, I don't think Tua's dropping, but that possibility, or I guess the chances of that happening are way, way higher than they were before. So, if the Dolphins end up would you take that? I mean, that's one heck of a gamble, and if you're right, you're really right. So yeah, I wouldn't be mad if that was the strategy. If that was the draft strategy going into the game, like if Chase Young is still there when we pick, and from all the information that we've gathered this offseason, I feel like we have a pretty good chance of getting Tua still. And if we can get both of them, then yeah, then you go. If you think you can, then you should do that, because that would be an all-time get. This next question comes from Richard. Richard asks, what about drafting Georgia running back D'Angelo Swift with our third first-round pick? We need an offensive maker and a game changer at running back. We haven't had that since Ricky Williams. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting running backs in this class. And you can always find a good running back, and as we've seen... did I say who that question came from? I want to be sure I did. Yeah, that question came from Richard. I don't think I did say your name, Richard, or maybe I did. Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to what the Patriots did in the later first round pick. If maybe the Texans pick or something like that, maybe you take a running back. Very similar to what the Patriots did with Sony Michel. They got a very talented player. I can't remember when Nick Chubb picked in the second round. The same draft, I think. Yeah. So yeah, you can always get that's definitely something the Dolphins need for sure as a running back. I mean, it's one of the biggest holes on this team. So depth too, by the way. This Dolphins team needs to get more than one. That is for sure. I'm talking a premium. I'm talking maybe a first to second round running back. And then pick one again in the third or fourth or fifth, like somewhere in there. Like, this team needs to get 2 good running backs. Maybe Patrick Laird can show us something in our starting role in a regular season, but who knows, man. But that is definitely something that the Dolphins should do. Would I be mad at Swift? No, I like Swift a lot. He's a very specific type of running back, which I'm totally fine with. Maybe he's not as versatile as a Josh Jacobs that came out last season. But maybe you can get like a Jonathan Taylor later in the draft. Probably not. That's more of a Mark Ingram type, and you can kind of combine the two because they do have different styles of running and different things that they can do well. But yeah, I am SkyX383. That has been it for this week's episode. It's been a very short one. We did 35 minutes. We usually do an hour. But yeah, that's all the content we had for today. Unfortunately, this team sucks, and it's bad. The defense is terrible. The offense is very one-dimensional, and it's hard to watch. It's definitely not easy to watch. I remember someone asked me a question in the show about how do you get through stuff like this, and I said, well, you just gotta evaluate the talent. And if I'm being honest, there's not much talent to evaluate. Most of these guys, when you watch them play, it's like that guy that doesn't have a future with this team. Most of them do not, and I'm being completely honest. Most of the players that play on Sunday do not have a future on this team, and maybe that's something we'll do next week with who I think is going to come back next year. Maybe we go through the entire roster, but I would say 80 to 85 to maybe 90 is a little bit too much % of this roster is not going to be here or shouldn't be here next year. A lot of these players are not good enough to start or have a future in this league, and that's my opinion. But when you talk about Ken Crowley, the Parker, was it Stephen Parker, a lot of the defensive linemen. I mean, a lot of these guys just don't have it, and that's unfortunate, and that's what makes this season even harder. My point is I would say, well, you would just evaluate the young players, but most of them just don't, they just don't have it. And hopefully we can get, more of that in this upcoming draft and try to get as much talent on this team as possible. So that's going to be it, guys. I am SkyX383, and I will see you guys in the next one.